The she-camel, carried off from us by colonialism, whose tracks I've kept following. The she-camel, on account of which, for so many, springtime sleep has escaped. The she-camel, we clung to wherever she was. The she-camel, for whom we sleepwalked over every obstacle. The she-camel, whose protection is the night owl's wailing call. The she-camel, whose rearguard poison snake struck death. The she-camel, whose possession the two foreign accomplices contended. Clasped was freedom by force. It wasn't bestowed on us. Grown men and youths on the day they leagued together. When God helped us and victory was the people's. The she-camel, whose victory chant I composed and sang. The she-camel, for whom I spread out thorny fronds of acacia and mara tree. The she-camel, for whose sake we bore hunger and such thirst. When her time came at the noonday of the birth pangs, her udders full, ready to suckle. Only the man of unwisdom holds her lactation can be stopped. When we had no missiles, nor automatics, the she-camel, to defend whom from the lion we dared not back away. Leaving her to the ostrich is something that will not happen.
And I think that's what has allowed all of these atrocities to have gone unchecked for 150 years, right? That we don't think about even Africans themselves, at least Africans who are not, Africans who are not like directly impacted by the establishment of national park, of protected areas, they don't necessarily associate conservation with extractive, right? So we think about, for example, mining, right? We hear a lot of contestation against mining industries, agricultural industries. Do we talk about agribusinesses that are land grabbing in Africa? And I said, well, wait a minute. I mean, I'm glad that you guys are calling these industries out, but you also have to call out conservationists, right? People don't associate conservation with extraction. And part of it is just the image of the conservationists that we've built into our mind, this propaganda, right? And it's part of the propaganda, the colonial propaganda machine. Jane Goodall, right? We think about her, she's a conservationist. She's a single species, what we call single species conservation, meaning that they're get attached to this, or just have an affinity, which makes no sense to me. Protect the entire ecosystem, not just that one wildlife. But
it sells, right? To Americans. That's how they sell it to Americans.
That's how they sell it, right?
Save the elephant, save the
right, exactly. And so exactly, right. So you have this Western fascination. At first, it was the Western fascination of the African landscape as this pristine area, this area of wilderness, right, which never existed. Same thing here. But then after that, you had the fascination with this iconic wildlife, like the elephant. There's even what we call the Big Five, the African Big Five. I don't know if have you heard of it, the African Big Five? So these are for trophy hunters, right? That know.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
The Big Five are the elephant, the Cape buffalo, the lion, the wildebeest, and the rhino. Right, those are
I see them taking photos with them. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And those, I'm sure you've heard about, Theodore Roosevelt expedition in Africa that nearly exterminated, the elephant population in Africa, right?
I think it was over 500 of animals.
Oh my goodness, these, and that's why I always, And so not only were they there to like protect the or were they trying, or at least claiming to want to protect African wildlife and landscape, but at the same time on this side, there were basic, the bloodlust of like trophy hunting, going in there in these huge expeditions to kill wildlife, right? Africa, it just made no sense, right? It was very incongruent. Yeah.
And when I was looking into this, they actually described Theodore Roosevelt as the first conservationist, which I was like, what?
Yeah, no, he was. Yeah. Well, I don't know if he'll be called the first conservationist, because I think that the romanticism era of that kind of went hand in hand with like the westward expansion. Those were really the one that sort of set the seed in people's mind about conservation, right? Putting aside the land to protect this pristine landscape. But Theodore Roosevelt was the one who really thrusted conservation, into the American policy arena, right? He signed, was it him? I know there are two Roosevelt. I'm sorry, I'm getting my American presidents wrong. But Theodore Roosevelt also established the National Park Service as well. So yeah, he was considered one of the first one.
I think he created a bunch of national parks.
Yeah, like a bunch of, right. He expanded the national park system in the United States. But before him, you had John Muir, also, who was another one, and and Gifford Pinchot. Pinchot was established the U.S. Forest Service. But all of them, were avid trophy hunters too, right? So they went to Africa. Not only, they established national parks there to preserve the landscape, but they were also going there for the bloodlust of like killing elephant, like of trophy hunting. I mean, it's such an atrocious, like violent game, right? That only white settlers will even. It's fitting of a white settler. It's so fitting of it. The way they've disseminated like the African elephant population is the same way they've also disseminated the indigenous population here, like so violent.